That one story I wanted to tell that Clinton was telling me about, up there in Wisconsin is kind of violent weather they have in the summertime. And one of the small churches that he had up there was, it wasn't a real well-to-do church. There weren't the people that went to the church that didn't have a lot of funds available for fixing up their church. And they wanted to spruce it up a little bit. And Clinton went down to the hardware store in town and asked if the hardware man would, donate the paint to paint the outside of the church. And he said, times are tough. We're in the kind of a depressed area here in the agricultural zone. He said, I'll tell you what. He said, I'll be happy to give it to you at wholesale price. He said, there's no problem with that. He says, you just get the money for it. And Clinton said, well, if I measure the church and I find out how much it is, we can work that out. So they went out and measured the church, and they found out they needed X number of gallons of paint. To paint it, went down and they talked to the fellow, and he got the most inexpensive latex paint available to kind of paint the church. And they found that they didn't even have enough money to buy the paint for wholesale. Well, Clinton was a little disappointed, and he thought, well, what should we do? Well, he said to himself, what we'll do is we'll buy enough paint. We've got enough paint, we can paint the lower part of the church. We can't paint the gables or under the eaves, or we can't paint the kind of the steeple on top of the church here. He said, but we'll at least get the lower part painted. So they bought the paint. They kind of stepped out in faith. They figured that sooner or later, people would maybe cough in some more money and they'd be able to paint the rest of the church, but to get the first part of it done. So they picked a Sunday to do it, and they'd got the scraping all done, and they brought the paint out there, and they kind of a work bee. Well, they started it early in the morning, painting the lower part of the church, and it was going so good. And, they got around three sides of the church, and Clinton began to look at this, and he realized that they had more paint than what he had figured they were going to need to paint this church. And he thought, well, maybe we've got a modern-day miracle going on here. He says, I know what I'll do. He says, I'll just thin this latex down just a little bit, and we'll have enough to get the gables. Well, they finished the deal, and they were kind of excited. They had more paint than what they thought, and so they painted the gables, And they were doing that, and Clinton was looking at the paint, and he thought, well, if I thinned it down just a tad more, we can get the gables underneath the eaves. So they were working away there, and they were getting that done, and he was kind of watching the paint there, and he thought, if I just take this last bucket and thin it down, we've cut it twice already, if I cut it again, it won't be quite as noticeable. We can paint the upper part of the steeple there, and then it'll be done. Well, they got it done, and they were just ecstatic. The congregation there was just tickled, and they had been working so hard, they had watched the squall line starting to come in from the west. Yes, and those of you that know about Wisconsin squall lines know when it rains, it rains. And sure enough, the clouds came in and just devastated the paint job they put on. Can you imagine what it looks like raining on a freshly painted latex building? It was a mess. And Clinton was just downhearted. He didn't know what to do. And they walked outside there, and the thunder was still moving away, and he was just disappointed. He thought a miracle had taken place. And out of the clouds, a voice spoke. And it said, repaint and thin not.